Hi there. You are listening to the Perio Patient Podcast, a podcast for my patients and anyone else who cares to listen. My name is Dr. Ben Young, and I am a periodontist in private practice in San Antonio, Texas. This podcast episode is number 60, and I have entitled it The Pareto Principle. A tooth has 4 distinct parts: enamel, dentin, a pulp chamber or canal, and the one most involved with periodontal disease, which is also microscopic and least known about or understood by the general population, and that is cementum. And as the name implies, it holds or cements something, and these are what we call periodontal fibers. Is it coming back to you? I hope so. It is the beginning of a story I have shared thousands of times with people who have come to me with questions about why their gums bleed or swell, or why a tooth or teeth are beginning to feel loose. Fortunately, there is a great deal we can do to treat this condition, and depending how early it is identified and addressed, it is often possible to achieve close to a reversible situation, at least in the short term. What do I mean by this? I mean that most everything we have encountered in the past with regards to infections and inflammatory responses to infections can return. There is no vaccine for periodontal disease, and immunity would be nice, but in this situation can set up inflammatory responses that result in further bone loss. Now, I said we can often reverse conditions through treatment in the short term, but what is necessary to maintain health in the long run requires a change in daily actions, which are out of the direct control of dentists and dental hygienists. What you do on a daily basis to take care of yourself and your consistent return to seeing professionals at an interval established to be a reasonable one in your particular case are critical components to your health, and they are both in your control, no one else's. I think it is the dental 80-20 rule. We've all heard of this, likely applied in many areas of life. Things like 20% of people do 80% of fill in the blank. So today, let me give you a little more detail on the 80-20 rule as it has come to be known. It evidently all started with an Italian economist by the name of Vilfredo Pareto and is known as the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. I can't think of ever wanting to talk about the principle of factor sparsity. Anyway, he made the observation back in 1896 that approximately 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. He then did surveys in other countries and found similar results. The concept, using Professor Pareto's name, was actually developed by a management consultant whose name was Joseph M. Giron. Interesting, he lived to the age of 102, died I think in 2008. And he was involved with quality management sides of businesses. He helped factories and other groups to improve their quality processes. But he also published a number of books, and that's where we get this 80-20 rule today. In computing, Microsoft noted that by fixing the top 20% of the most reported bugs, 80% of the related errors and crashes in a given system would be eliminated. Another one in this computing area is that 20% of the code has 80% of the errors. Another in computing is, in general, 80% of a certain piece of software can be written in 20% of the total allocated time. Conversely, the hardest 20% of the code takes 80% of the time. Let's look at sports. In baseball, the Pareto Principle is reflected in what is known as wins above replacement, which is an attempt to combine multiple statistics to determine a player's overall importance to a team. What they determined was that 15% of all the players in a recent particular year produced 85% of the total wins, with the other 85% of the players creating 15% of the wins. Some sports trainers believe that 20% of exercises and habits have 80% of the impact, and I would say that's true in perio, suggesting that trainees should reduce variety of exercises and focus on a few more effective ones. Again, back to my area, I would say flossing is the 20. It's the big one. Occupational health and safety professionals use the Pareto Principle when focusing on hazard prioritization. They believe that 20% of hazards account for 80% of injuries. And so these are the hazards most important to be addressed first. Let's go to health. In healthcare in the United States, one study showed that 20% of patients have been found to use 80% of healthcare resources. Which actually, if you think about it, that's kind of good news for most of us who don't need 80% of healthcare resources. And again, going back to what you do on a daily basis, keeping you as healthy as possible is a really good thing. Hope you're hearing the siren in the background there. Let's move on. For crime analysis, the study known as the Dunedin study found that 80% of crimes are committed by 20% of criminals. And so this was an idea that caused some to arrest people who were bypassing subway tokens, jumping the counter to get free rides. And then they do background checks and found that many of them were wanted for things like murder. There is even a Pareto Principle for disease transmission, talking about COVID, where approximately 20% of infected people are responsible for 80% of transmissions. These are the ones known as super spreaders. In the reverse, that means that the majority of individuals don't transmit viruses to very many people. Taking this a little further, we are more likely to become sick by the 20% we're around most of the time compared with the 80% we pass by or have very brief contacts with. I think this indicates that it's really pretty safe to go shopping. So now back to my 80-20 observations. 20% of your long-term success in maintaining a healthy mouth is based on the work of professionals. Let that sink in. It's only 20%. This doesn't mean they are unimportant, only that they can only help recreate a healthier environment in the short run. After this, there has to be a management plan in order for health to be sustained for the long haul. Let's reverse and look at it from the 80% now. In order to sustain health, you have 80% of the responsibility, and it involves two simple tasks. The first one is daily home care. Neglect flossing, for example, even for a day, and in some people, this has the potential of restarting problems that then can begin to snowball. That's why I continue to say that the question of flossing, are you flossing, is yes or no. Yes, if it is consistently accomplished every day without fail, and no, or not yet, if it has not reached this level of consistency once a day. Remember, flossing doesn't cure anything, only maintains a level of health, and only for a period of time until bacteria have colonized again in the harder to reach areas, the ones you can't reach with floss, which then brings us to job number 2. You and only you are in charge of managing your appointments. When you need to see your dentist or dental hygienist to take care of those areas you're not able to directly reach, you need someone else to disrupt the organized plaque or biofilm, which then forces those pesky bacteria to have to reform, regrow, and become toxic and destructive once again. Well, that's enough for today. Please leave a comment and let me know if you have any 80-20 rules or thoughts, things that you use in your daily life. I'd love to hear about them. This has been the Perio Patient Podcast, and I am still Dr. Ben Young. Thanks for listening. Bye for now, and we'll talk again soon. Take care. A sign on the front lawn of a rehab center said, "Keep off the grass. Now go floss."